Pardon? Yeah, she's in there now. Or she wasn't, but she is now. Good afternoon. This council meeting for the Township of Selwyn, Tuesday, April the 11th, 2023 will now come to order. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mishi, Sagae, and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Please observe a moment of silence so the council, staff, and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the intranet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none, please note that in the minutes. And we have our minutes of March the 28th, 2023 for our regular council meeting. Can I have someone move them? Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is there any discussion out of the minutes? Seeing none, we will go to our first delegation. Our delegation today is from Tom Unrau with the Kawartha Land Trust. And Mr. Unrau, can we have a 10-minute time frame?
Great. Very much for the invitation. There is a presentation. Good. Okay. Oh, this is funny. I thought I had a presentation. Thanks very much for the introduction. It's from Kawartha Land Trust, and I'm here today to talk about an initiative the organization has going on in Selwyn Township that we're calling the Burley to Lakefield Trails. Let's see that. The Burley to Lakefield Countryside Trail. And I just wanted to start really quickly by saying that I grew up in the area. I grew up in Lakefield. And there's some photos here of some trails that I feel have a culture and impact on it. So I grew up climbing the creek by Race Creek, and walking with my family the trail back there, biking into Peterborough to see my friends on the Rotary Trail. I had some of my first experiences as a young naturalist on the Frank University Trail. So trails in this region or in this area where I grew up really had a tremendous impact on me. And this is the reason really that Kawartha Land is involved in these things. So that trails can be available for folks to get outside and improve their quality of life, and to fall in love with nature, right? To have these experiences outside, I think of their appreciation of the natural world and their interest in that. So as a reminder for anybody who isn't familiar with Kawartha Land Trust, show of hands, anybody who's never heard of us. Okay, great. So we're a regional conservation charity, supported by the public and government funds, that we apply for grants for. And our primary interest is in creating new nature reserves. So we own over 4,800 acres in Peterborough County and City of Port Phillip, so about 5,300 now. And 7 of those nature reserves are in Selwyn. So our first one ever was down on Preston Road. These lands are made available for the benefit of nature and perpetuity, and also for the benefit of them are completely wide open public access, and we tracked around 20,000 user days on our properties 2 years ago. And some of them are more for public, sort of private events where we invite people to experience nature. And so I think one of those slides there is that the last one is saying that we have 5 sites where we have about 40 kilometers of nature trails on our properties that are public. And this is an example of one of them. Anybody walked on the Stony Lake trails? See some nodding head? Yeah. I think it's lovely. It's one of the few places you can access Stony Lake. Walk down to the shoreline there and have a nice picnic on the dock that we provide. You can boat up and hike the trails. The red loop there is owned by the Land Trust. And this is an interesting initiative it's sort of analogous to what I'll be speaking about today, because the trail goes over for the land trust properties and then properties that are managed in partnership with private landowners. So Miami Resort has trails in their property. 2 private landowners on the Stony trails have trail agreements with the organization. We manage the trail. This is very similar to what I'm presenting for today. So as the name implies, the Burley to Lakefield Trail, we plan on going from Burley to Lakefield. This really started as an idea when we permanently protected the Christie Bentham wetland because we took the plant road for the park road. So that's 137 acres of purchase with support from the community in 2019. And one of the main reasons we were successful to do this is that people love the trails. And they wanted to know that they'd have access to those trails forever. They could family walking those trails. And as we did this, we realized there are other trails in this region. Maybe we can extend the impact that we're having there to the larger area. So then this sort of idea was born of this route between Burley Falls and so it's charted out here roughly. This is not a trail that exists on the ground in all these places, although some places it does. And the idea is that there are 20 private landowners that we need to work through or with to get this trail built. That it crosses 4 of our existing nature reserves of 1 land by economy conservation. And that this would be a place where we would have access to nature, of course, for people using the trails, but also use it as a way to inspire the sort of conservation corridor or ethical conservation. To also steward the properties for the nature. And along with the private landowner, private property that's in this route, one property is, or several properties are owned by Selwyn. And of course, I've been working with Mike for a couple of years on some other trail initiatives, and it's always been great. And we, before getting too deep into working together on Selwyn properties, so the properties that the trail is proposed to go over, 2 of them are unopened road allowances. These are forested to the country paths. Some of them are do get used by folks with tractors, by their dogs, things like that. So there would be much happening to some of them. So specifically that one on 13th line, the southern or the bottom side. And the other one is a little bit more open, but it is public land. Sorry, covered in forest. It is public land and actually sort of establishing trail there. And then, of course, we work really hard to make sure that our properties are where there are public access. It works for the neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. We don't want to create problems with parking, signage, and all that stuff. And so, as part of the broader initiative, beyond the trail that we're proposed to go, so a broader initiative that would like that parking and signage, parking in strange places and disrupting. And so just as a reminder, what's being proposed here is not similar to the Rotary Trail that goes from Lakefield to Peterborough. This is really more of a nature trail, so it's a natural substrate, we say, hiking kind of thing. We're not proposing motorized use, and we have 9 staff and over 100 volunteers. Imagine once it's established, it would be well managed. Another reason that prompted me to come to seek permission or support from council today was in talking with the landowner, the Ministry of Transportation Ontario specifically. So they own that parcel, as you're probably aware, part of Young's Point. And so we're requesting a license agreement with them to have a portion of the trail on that property. And of course, they're asking, well, what's someone's position on this notion? And so we need to be able to go back to them in order to we're working with staff. And so as a reminder, yeah, the trail that's being proposed is not a permanent fixture on somebody's property. And that would be the same whether it's selling property or private landowners. This isn't an interest in land. It's not a right of way. This is an agreement with the landowner. It's voluntary and you take on. So with that, I drafted, I think you saw in the minutes, I drafted a bit of a letter with the request. So I can read it out here. And, basically I'm looking at council acknowledge that they're aware of the Burley to Lakefield Countryside Trail and that they encourage local land trust in their efforts to provide access to the outdoors for community members, given that nature trails are valuable spaces that impact the mental and physical health of our residents and increase connections to nature and our heritage. And that Salmon Township endorses in principle the concept of a well-planned Burley to Lakefield Trail. That Salmon staff work with KLT to consider proposed trails on Salmon Township land and collaborate to identify and required work to address parking and signage needs. And the council be updated at future time once more detailed, more detailed plan is available. So again, I'm not, requesting that we put the trail over the lands tomorrow, or that we start putting up signs and announcing this big trail that's going across the county. But I do think that getting sort of early support on this initiative will help get the ball rolling and answer some of the questions. So I'm not sure if that's 10 minutes. Is there any questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation, and for sure any additional trails in our township are advantageous for so many reasons. And we appreciate that you are doing this work to move this forward. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Tom. A couple of questions. I'm on Iatts Point Lane, so we have the trails in behind us, and there's two major property owners that would connect that to the ministry property, obviously. At what stage are you at talking to those landowners? I know one of them reasonably well, and I know both of them, but I know one of them much better. Where is KLT with discussing the trail with a lot of those property owners? Because again, as you said, to make a big announcement when none of those people have been contacted wouldn't be good. So what stage are you at with talking to those private property owners at this point?
Yeah, those in particular, we haven't been in contact with them.
Okay.
So we've been working with them to go first, wanting to get their support and first characters. It's sort of this, who's going to go first to the situation. Everybody wants neighbors are in, but so haven't been in contact with them, although I hope to shortly after.
Just a follow-up question. You mentioned that one of the properties is the Tonabee Conservation Authority, and both John and I are on the ORCA board, and certainly support that collaboration. And frankly, I'd probably like to see more of that collaboration, because that's Tonabee Conservation owns a lot of property, but not necessarily in the trail business in a lot of those properties. And I think that relationship and working together on connecting those properties, I think is an important part of moving forward with trails. So I encourage you to work with ORCA closely and identify other potential properties that either you can jointly work or have them transferred to KLT or something like that.
That's great. I look forward to that as well. It seems to be working on a couple of different patents, license agreements with other folks.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Boyko.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Tom. As one who has spent many hours on my bike and running on the Rotary Trail between Lakefield and Trent University, I am a big advocate for the trail system as well. You're coming to us asking for us to be aware and to support and to cooperate. I guess my only question is, and I think I know the answer to this, if we were to support and cooperate, would there be any cost to the township?
The cost of being excited about this and supporting us, because we're so keen to have this trail built. No, there's no cost, this is just, basically treating it as a private landowner along the street. So we do the trail work, we handle the insurance, so there is no wire cost. Although we both, it's an asset to your, to the community, so you're-
Excellent, thank you. And staff time, no doubt, in helping with that cooperation. Yeah, if the pandemic taught us anything, one thing it did teach us was the importance of being outside as physical and mental health, and a well-established trail system is one way of doing that. So thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Councillor Henry.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. Tom, thank you for your presentation. I actually live up in that area and definitely appreciate the outdoors. My question would be, what happens during hunting season? Just because I know that living there, many people actually hunt in that area.
We're dealing with one-on-one relationships with about 20 to private landowners to establish. So it's going to depend on the landowner. So if every person along the route, already granting access to the property, then I don't think you would. Although I'm actually over there. So again, sort of thing. But I think larger organizations like the Trail Conservancy, that's probably voluntary units like those, still case by case basis.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I need a motion to receive the presentation, and there is a recommended resolution on our agenda. So Councillor Boyko, you are willing to move it, seconded by Councillor Henry. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to our next delegation, Carrie Snoddy of County of Peterborough, Manager of Waste Management. Is she on the line, Deputy Clerk? Can't.
I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for having me today. My presentation is for information purposes for Selwyn Council, and it goes over upcoming changes to the Blue Box program to producer responsibility, as well as upcoming decisions that Selwyn Council will have the opportunity to make based on these changes coming up. To start, what is producer responsibility? So it's a regulatory approach to waste management where producers that make and import Blue Box products into Ontario are responsible for the waste generated from their products and packaging, as well as the costs to recycle them. So in Ontario, the Blue Box program is transitioning from the current model, which is shared industry funding, to one of producer responsibility. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the current model, which is the shared industry funding model. So producers create products, residents purchase those products, they consume them, and they put the Blue Box material in the Blue Box. Local governments and municipalities operate the Blue Box program, collect the material, and the producers pay the municipalities to cover about half the costs of operating the program. In the new producer responsibility program on the right-hand side, municipalities will be taken out as far as operating and managing the Blue Box program and covering the costs. The producers will take over that themselves, and so they will be responsible for the program and all of the costs. There are a couple pieces of relevant legislation that are pushing these changes forward through the province. The first is the Environmental Protection Act and Ontario Regulation 101/94. This is the older legislation. It's been in place since 1994, and this legislation requires municipalities to establish and operate a Blue Box system in Ontario. That older regulation has been amended to move into the new legislation, which was passed in 2016 by the province of Ontario, which is the Waste Free Ontario Act, including the Waste Diversion Transition Act and Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. And so the goal behind this legislation is to create a better waste management system in Ontario, make more of a circular economy, and establish a new producer responsibility framework for a number of different recycling programs. So programs that have already transitioned to producer responsibility in Ontario are tires, electronics, household hazardous waste, and batteries. And now we're getting into the biggest program to transition over, which is the Blue Box program. There was a regulation passed under this legislation in 2021, which is the new Blue Box regulation. And this has all the specific details in it as far as what the producer requirements are, what their recycling targets are, and what they have to do to operate the new program. So how the county and township Blue Box program currently works is that Peterborough County administers the Blue Box program on behalf of each of the 8 townships. The county holds a contract with Emterra Environmental, who collects the Blue Box material at the curb, as well as the depots throughout the county. So for Selwyn, this would be at the Smith landfill site. And they also process the Blue Box material for us in Peterborough at the Pido Road recycling facility. The county submits the annual cost to do this to the province through the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority. And so we get 50% funding back to offset some of the costs. And the county also supplies the infrastructure, which would be the front end bins that residents, when they bring their Blue Box material to the Smith landfill, that they put the material into those bins. And so we supply those bins to the townships to allow for collection at the depot sites. Under the new producer responsibility program, producers are required to collect from what the legislation has defined as eligible sources. So they are required to collect from residents, so single family homes and multi-residential homes. They're required to collect from facilities, which would be not-for-profit long-term care homes, retirement homes, and schools. And they're required to collect from public spaces. There are also a separate category called non-eligible sources that I'll get into closer to the end of the presentation. And these are the types of properties that producers are not required to collect from. There will be a transition period from July 1st this year to December 31st, 2025. And during this 2.5-year period, every municipality in Ontario has been designated a transition date where they will move to producer responsibility. And so for Peterborough County, every township has been assigned a transition date of January 1st, 2024 to transition to producer responsibility. Municipalities can choose to negotiate with the producers and producer responsibility organizations to continue service delivery during the transition period or fully divest their responsibility at that time. And the County of Peterborough has chosen to divest on January 1st, 2024. And I'll get into what that means a little bit later in the presentation as well. And then there will be a post-transition period from January 1st, 2026 and afterwards. At that point, all municipalities in Ontario will have transitioned to full producer responsibility. Producers will be responsible for communications, replacing blue boxes, basically operating the whole program. And so again, all townships have been given the transition date of January 1st, 2024. As far as the designated materials, so what is considered recyclable under this new producer responsibility program, during the transition period, producers have to collect and accept the same types of blue box material that were included before. So during transition, nothing will change in the blue box program in the county as far as what's recyclable and what's not recyclable. Starting January 1st, 2026, producers have to collect a new designated materials list under the regulation. And so this shows an example of, currently on the left, this is just an example of typical materials that municipalities collect in their Blue Box programs, but it varies by municipality. So every municipality has a different list of what's considered recyclable and what isn't based on their contracts with their companies that are recycling that material. Whereas in 2026, all municipalities will have the same list of items as far as what's recyclable and what isn't, and it's going to be an expanded list of materials. So everything that the county is currently collecting that is considered recyclable will still be considered recyclable in 2026, plus there will be additional items like single-use products, so plastic cutlery, plates, styrofoam, things like that will be added to the Blue Box program. And this is just another visual representation of that. So on the left in the current program, every municipality is different. On the right, there'll be one consistent list across the province of what's recyclable. It's also important to note the difference between a producer and a producer responsibility organization, or PRO. So producers are the brand holders and importers of the products that contain Blue Box materials. So it's any company that sells products or imports products into the Ontario market, which would include grocery store foods with packaging, retail store items with packaging, and fast food packaging. A producer responsibility organization, or PRO, is one organization that represents the producers and basically manages the program for them so they can meet their requirements under the regulations. So rather than having hundreds of different producers doing their own thing, they all group together in this one producer responsibility organization. They pay their fees into this organization, and the PRO operates the Blue Box program on their behalf. There are a few PROs in Ontario, 4 or 5, and each producer decides which PRO they want to join. So this is an example on the left-hand side. These are examples of producers, so big companies, they're all very recognizable. And so all of these large companies have signed on with this producer responsibility organization, or PRO, on the right-hand side, Circular Materials Ontario, or CMO. And they are the largest PRO in Ontario. They have the vast majority of producers signed on to them. So essentially, they are responsible for what's called the Common Collection System. So Circular Materials Ontario, again, the largest PRO in Ontario, they will procure and award agreements for collection and consolidation of the Blue Box materials. Once communities have transitioned over, they've also hired a company called Reverse Logistics Group, or RLG, which will manage their contracts for them. And so municipalities have to share critical details about our programs and our eligible sources to Circular Materials prior to the transition to make sure that it's a smooth handover of responsibility of the program. So again, Circular Materials, or CMO, will oversee the Common Collection System. They'll ensure that there's curbside and depot collection for all eligible sources. They'll determine the locations of the receiving facilities, so that's where all the recyclable material will be consolidated, as well as the recycling facilities. So given the extensive scope of work and limited timeline to implement this new province-wide collection system, CMO presented a standard offer to all municipalities in Ontario, requesting that they provide interim Blue Box services during their transition period. So they want municipalities to work for them as a contractor to continue to operate the Blue Box program during the transition period, and they would pay municipalities to do that. So municipalities can either opt in or opt out to this offer. Municipalities that want to continue to provide collection can opt in by signing agreements with commercial terms set by CMO and become a contractor to them. Municipalities not wanting to provide collection service can opt out, and then CMO will secure arrangements with an alternative service provider. And they've indicated that during the transition period, this will likely be the contractor who is currently servicing the area. So in our area, that would be Amterra. So communities can consider providing services at one or multiple points in the collection system. Peterborough County Council has decided to opt out of all services, and there's a link to the council report here. Because of this, there's an opportunity for townships to contract with CMO for depot operations, if you wish to do so, to allow CMO to continue to use the township depots to meet their legislative requirements, and townships would be compensated for this service. So since Peterborough County has opted out, CMO has approached the current contractor, Emterra, to offer them an agreement to continue to service all townships throughout the transition period. So they've offered Emterra to continue to do curbside collection throughout the entire county, as well as collect the blue box material from the depots. So in Selwyn's case, this would be from the Smith landfill. And CMO is required by the legislation to collect blue box material from the same number of depots that are currently being used in each township during the transition period. So in order to meet their requirements under the legislation, they need permission from the townships to continue to use those depots, and they're offering contracts to you for depot operations to allow them to continue to use them during the transition period. So there are some pros and cons to each option. If you decide to opt in, you would be signing a contract with CMO for depot operations. Pros would be that the blue box services would remain at the current depot. Townships will receive payments from CMO to do this. So the arrangement is based on CMO paying the townships to allow residents to drop off recyclable material at the depots. Cons would be that the townships would have to agree to CMO's contract terms, and that the payments would be standardized for all townships. So they will be coming up with a standard payment model to propose to each township, likely based on number of depot operating hours. If you opt out and don't sign a contract with CMO, this means that you would likely no longer be collecting blue box material at the Smith landfill. So townships have no responsibility for the blue box program. And so if you did not contract with CMO, you wouldn't have to follow any of CMO's contract terms, and there may be additional space at the Smith landfill to utilize for other diversion programs. Cons to opting out would be that CMO does have to offer blue box depot services at another location in the township. So they would have to set up another depot somewhere in Selwyn where residents could drop off blue box material. So that would likely be inconvenient for residents to do that. And townships likely, well, they wouldn't be receiving any payments from CMO for this option. So as far as next steps, CMO has developed a statement of work document for depot operations that they've presented to each township. So they've developed contract documents that they have sent to each township to review. They did set up meetings, and Selwyn and county staff met with CMO on March 30th. And Selwyn staff were able to ask CMO questions they had regarding the contract documents. CMO has not presented their standard payment model yet to townships, so that we expect in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, you'll be able to see that to see what you would actually be compensated for. As far as site infrastructure, the county currently owns the front end bins that are at the depots for the blue box material, but there's an opportunity for the county to either transfer ownership of the bins to the townships or the contractor, Emterra. And that way you would have the bins still at the Smith landfill to utilize if you did decide to opt in. And then as far as final steps would be, once staff have had a chance to review the agreements, Selwyn staff can bring a report to council, and your council can decide if you wish to opt in or opt out. And then the last piece that I want to touch on before the end of the presentation was the non-eligible sources, which kind of throws a wrench into everything and makes everything a little bit more complicated. So producers are not required to collect from these locations. These are all these locations on the right-hand side. So industrial or commercial properties, municipal buildings, daycares, places of worship, commercial farms, campgrounds. So they have said that there are options to continue to collect this material during the transition period only. They won't allow this material to be mixed in with eligible materials starting in 2026. So the county's contractor currently collects recycling curbside from about 600 of these properties. In Selwyn, there's about 250 properties that the county collects curbside recycling from that are considered non-eligible. So county staff are working on options to present to county council on whether the county continues to provide blue box services to these non-eligible sources starting in 2024 and how we could fund this program. Because during the transition period, even though that material is allowed to be mixed in, the county would still be responsible to pay for the cost of that material since the producers aren't required to collect it. So I won't get too far into these options, but the first option that the county is considering is to continue to collect from the non-eligible sources, and the program would be paid for by the residential and commercial tax levies. This is how the program is currently being funded, but this does mean that residents would be supplementing the costs for commercial property collection. Option 2 would be that the county continues to collect from the non-eligible sources, and the recycling program would be paid for by the commercial tax levy only. So only the properties that would be receiving this service would be paying for the service. This would likely result in an increase of costs to these properties though. And then option 3 would be to stop collecting from these properties, and they would be responsible for their own private arrangements for blue box collection, which means there wouldn't be any costs on their tax bill for that service, but it likely would be more expensive for them to set up their own private arrangements. County staff have been surveying non-eligible sources on their preferred options. So we sent a letter to each non-eligible source property that we had, and there's a link to a survey in the letter for them to complete by April 30th. We've had about 75 responses to the survey so far, and the survey just asks what their preferred option would be out of those 3 options that I just presented, and gives a bit of background information on everything as well. So if you do get any inquiries based on that survey, please feel free to pass them along to county staff. As far as the non-eligible sources at the depots or at the Smith landfill site, CMO is willing to collect that material as well during the transition period at the depots for a cost. If the townships cannot prove otherwise, CMO will assume that 25% of the blue box material in the bins is from non-eligible sources. However, they've developed certain methods for determining an actual percentage, one of them being looking at MPAC data and the number of commercial properties versus residential properties. So that can be submitted to CMO if you decide to contract with them and work with them, and you can send them your actual percentage, which is much smaller than 25%. So that's something to keep an eye on if you do decide to contract with CMO. So as far as summary and next steps, all townships transition to producer responsibility January 1st, 2024. The county's opted out of providing all blue box services. CMO will be responsible for providing the contractor for curbside collection and collection at depots. And CMO is interested in working with townships for depot operations so they can meet their legislative requirements and continue using existing depots for blue box material drop-off. The CMO has provided townships with the contract documents for consideration, and they will supply a payment model for you to consider as well. And then township councils can determine whether you would like to contract with CMO or not. County staff will continue to work with townships on the non-eligible source options at the depots and review the survey results for the curbside non-eligible sources and bring that to county council, likely the first meeting in June for a decision. And county staff are available to assist the townships wherever needed. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Are there any questions of Carrie? with regards to her presentation. And is there anything that staff would like to add to what Carrie has said? Janice?
Not a great deal. I think Carrie's provided a great summary of the process as it is. We have, as she noted, had a meeting with CMO with regard to the agreement documents. There are a number of concerns with those documents that we would need to work out. As you'll recall, it is on our work plan for this year to work through this process. So all I can say at this point is stay tuned. We'll bring a report to you as soon as we have some good information.
For sure, there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers at this point in time. Anyway, thank you very much again, Carrie. Can I have a motion to receive her presentation? Moved by Deputy Mayor Black, seconded by Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That's Carrie. Thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We are now moving on to question period. Are there any questions from the public?
And none came in by email either.
All right. Thank you very much. We will now move on to the municipal officers and staff reports, and we will start with Janice on the first quarter reports.
Thank you. Yes, so this is our work plans that were approved in December by council that kind of set out our major projects throughout the year. Typically what we do is Sherry will just lead you through each work plan, and any questions that you have, we will try and answer. Most of the managers are here. I don't see Gord, and Sarah's not with us. Sarah's on Zoom. Okay, great. So yeah, we'll just proceed and we'll answer the questions as we go.
All right. Thank you very much. So we're first looking at the Chief Administrative Officer report. Are there any questions on that? Seeing none, we'll move on to Building and Planning. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Clerk's Department. No questions? I have a couple. Under the community transportation pilot for the link, Angie, the hiring a consultant to conduct a transit operational review and feasibility study, will that be covered by the grant?
Yes, it will. The entire consulting cost would be covered by the grant.
Okay, thank you. Under the waste management and diversion, the food cycler pilot program, there were a lot of people who were out of the country or on holidays or enjoying the winter down south, and they came back and found out we had this program and would dearly like to take part in it. And the question that's being asked is, would we consider another cycle of the food cycler?
Yeah, so we did sell out of the 250 units that we had available in the program. So there was definitely lots of interest. We are going to provide a report to council because, as you know, as part of the pilot, people had to track their use of the food cycler. So Lily will have a report, and it would be great based on kind of the results of that and the success of it. I think it will be successful. If council wanted to do another program, you'd have to incorporate it into the budget. So we could look at that for next year's budget, or it would require a budget amendment this year if you wanted to do another pilot this year.
We'd have to have our finance guy find some money for us. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Thank you. We're moving on to financial services. Any questions from Lane? Okay. Well, next is fire department. Any questions? Do we have someone? I know that Gord's not here, but is there someone that could answer a question for him?
I'm actually on, Sherry. I'm just on.
Oh.
Zoom. Sorry.
Okay. So is there anyone who has a question for Gord, our fire chief? I've got one. What is other, Gord?
Sherry, what it takes in, and if you see the number of calls and halls 3 and 2, typically are a lot of automatic aids and Durodummer that we cover for. Power lines down, ice water rescues, faults calls, some of them unknown calls, lift assists, propane gas leaks, assist EMS if they need to get into a house or whatever. So those kinds of calls.
Okay, thank you very much. And have we decided yet if we're having the pancake breakfast?
At this point, I'm thinking not. So if you look, seems COVID's ramping up a little bit again. And this morning sounds like Ontario Minister of Health is really trying to get people to do a booster shot. So it's, you know, it's kind of hard if we can't go to a training session that, you know, really to start pulling everybody in together to do the pancake breakfast this year might be a little difficult. So especially we get so many firefighters in one spot and so many people in one spot. So
Okay,
gotta try to keep my people healthy for a little bit more. So
okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to human resources. Any questions? No. Next is library services. No questions. Parks and Rec. Okay, we've got a hand up, Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Senes. Really, it's an item that's come up in both the community and corporate services and the parks to do with docking. The one in corporate services deals with engaging the TSW with possible opportunities for expanding docking at the works yard, the Blue Building and the Marina. And get maybe an update on that one. And then the other one was the deal with the additional docking at the Lakeville Marina. Some discussion around talking to TSW around adding docks there as well.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we haven't looked into that actually a whole lot right now. It's still, we're getting the campground up and going. And throughout the summer, the plan is to continue on the Marina master or utilization study. And that is one of the items is that looking at both Hague and the Marina to see. Yeah.
Just to follow up, thank you for that, Mike. Yeah, I think, you know, given the lengthy waiting list, I think it's something that definitely you got to take a close look at moving forward for sure. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Parks and Rec. Did we deal with that? That was, we just dealt with, okay. Public Works. Any questions? I have one. You're not going to get off so easy, Adam. Can you just give us an update on the James Gifford Causeway? I know that some information came out. I know it's a county project, but we are working with them. So you had a meeting recently. Can you just let council know where we stand with that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. We did have a meeting with the county a few weeks ago. So the county tendered that project out as one whole project with the bridge and roadworks all continued in one scope. And the two bidders that came in, there was 2 bids for it. Bidders both came in well above what the county council would approve the budget for this year. So my understanding is that tender is going to be canceled. And what they're going to do is actually break it down into 2 components. So they're going to pull the roadworks and the bridge works separately, hoping to sustain some better pricing and to try to move the project forward. So this year, they're still looking to do the roadworks. So they're working on retendering it out at the end of April. They're hopeful to have a crew on site by June and then complete the roadworks portion by October. And then next year, they'll do the bridge work separately.
Okay. Are we doing our portion of the work at that time because we're involved in it to an extent?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we will be doing the street lighting and the multi-use trail. We'll go from Robinson Road, well, the parking area there up to the bridge approach. the multi-use trail and the street lighting. We are removing the parking lot component of the project right now, just because of the cost.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, Deputy Mayor Black, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you through you, Mayor Sennis. With regards to yard and leaf pickups, had a number of, discussion with the county coordinating collection. A number of people asked me about potential depots in the township in areas where it's not being collected now. There are residents that don't have the opportunity to blow them into the woods somewhere, but also don't have the ability to get them to the landfill when we have that available to them. Has there been any discussion around potential drop-off sites in farthest parts of the township for those folks to bring their bagged leaves?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not at this time. We do accept them at the Smith landfill. If people want to bring them there, they're welcome to, but we don't have kind of remote collection sites right now for that. So that hasn't been discussed yet.
Is it something that's can be put on the agenda with the county? I know it's a county program, so.
Yeah, we could have talks with the county and see if there's interest in that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I need a motion to receive the reports. Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We will move on to Mr. Vance, Manager of Financial Services, 2023 first quarter financial report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so the report goes through an actuals to budget comparison, and it's at the same consolidated level at that summary budget level that council's seen before with the approval of the budget process. Just take a few minutes to go through, given the fact this is the first quarter that's presented to this council. So definitely early part of the year, but with respect to council's responsibilities, they should be reviewing the attachments with the idea of if something is in that 20 to 30% range, then things are tracking along fairly consistent at this point, given the fact we're a quarter of the way through the year. If not, then council should kind of question why, right? So I've outlined some things on the cover report. Insurance would be a big reason for that, in that we pay our annual insurance premium at the start of the year. Memberships quite often are paid at the start of the year. So those types of things and I would have noted those in the overview report. So that could be a reason why, say, services hired or supplies and overhead, things like that, maybe would be higher than 25% at this point in the year. Of course, another would be the seasonal matters. So in say Department 21, winter control, we finished up the majority of our winter at this point in time. I've noted in there that supplies of sand and salt are something that we do in the fall, so that we'll always have an indicator on how things are looking. Landfill site, we would probably be less than 25% at this point because the landfill site revenues pick up during the summer season and into the fall. So those are some of the types of reasons why things would differ a little bit. And so this really just relates to council's fiduciary responsibility to review. And I want to give council some assurance that if there was anything that I was aware of or anything that I was concerned about, I would note that in the cover report. And that's something that's been a longstanding tradition here in the council chamber. So at this point in the year, other than what's noted on the cover report, I don't have any concerns at this point.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sennis. Thanks for the report. I'll call you Lane instead of Mr. Vance. I've known Lane for 30 years and have a great deal of faith in his ability to manage our resources. Lane, in looking at the information that you presented to us and, given our fiduciary responsibility for the township, moving forward, I think providing a consolidated statement of revenue expenses, one line per department, something like that, I think would be more valuable to us as opposed to looking through 27 pages of very detailed information. I think a summary would give me a better feel for where we are with respect to revenues and expenses. And like I said, even a one line by department kind of thing, I think would be helpful as a cover. If people want to dig into the weeds on an individual department, ask questions, that's fine. And potentially this council, I think, needs to discuss maybe having a finance committee down the road to review quarterly statements so recommendations can be brought back to council. It's a daunting task to read financials for many people, and having a committee that meets quarterly and maybe a couple of times through budget preparations to bring information back to council, I think would be helpful. So I know that's not on the agenda for discussion today, but I think it's something that this council should consider moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I need someone to move the recommendation to receive the report. Deputy Mayor Black. Councillor Koulis, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And we're moving on to Herr Lumberg, our planner, Bill 23, Planning Act changes for site plan control approval, bylaw and guidelines. Mr.
Thank you.
Lumberg.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. So today I'm just presenting the actual bylaw update change as a result of resolution number 2023-025. These changes to our site plan control bylaw are being implemented as required through recent legislative changes, as council is aware, through Bill 23. We did deal with the changes required from Bill 109 earlier this year. Substantially, the required change is to exempt residential developments of 10 units or less from site plan control, which is our current bylaw in certain instances requires that kind of control on 10 units or less. So that's the substantive change. One of the more significant areas that this will have an impact on, as outlined in my report, is the McCloskey, Steranko, and Hughes subdivisions, which are rural subdivisions off the 17th line, just off of Buckhorn Lake. So it was deemed at the time that that level of control would be required for those subdivisions as an environmental control to ensure that the woodlands in that area were protected. And so site plan control up until as of Bill 23 basically outlined that the site plans would need to delineate the area of woodland to be protected and not removed. We're not able to any longer implement this level of control because of Bill 23. So and so that's just addressing that specifically in my report, just so that the council is aware. There were also some other minor requirements where site plan could be required on single lot development, such as in under our old bylaw required site plan control for vacant lots on private roads was another matter. I'm not entirely sure because I haven't been here for that long, but I'd imagine that level of control was placed in our old bylaw to ensure that new residential developments met the 30-meter setback requirement under our zoning bylaw, which will obviously continue to apply. However, we won't have this additional level of control for that type of development following the passage of Bill 23. So that's the main substantive change, is just making sure our new bylaw, the site plan control bylaw, is consistent with provincial legislation that residential lots or residential development of less than 10 units or less, we do not apply site plan control. I also have made some other minor administrative modifications to our bylaw, just for clarity's sake. We did used to have a definition of floodplain. I felt it inappropriate to have that definition in there. I don't want to duplicate what the Otonabee Region Conservation Authority does or cause any sort of conflict between what they do and what we define as a floodplain. So I think it's an unnecessary definition. Let the conservation authority do their job, and they can define what's a floodplain, right? I've also added a provision just as in case of there's guidelines attached to this particular bylaw that we provide to the public. Without this provision that I suggest would be appropriate, we would need to amend the entire bylaw if we wanted to update the guideline. So what I'm proposing is any substantive changes going forward to the guideline, in case we need to add clarification in a certain paragraph or something, we can do that through resolution of council rather than pass a whole new bylaw. And then also that minor corrections such as typos and spellings and sections numbering and stuff like that can be done by staff only. We don't need to bring that forward to council. I'm also adding home occupations as an exemption to site plan control. This has always been the case. They're included as a matter of a residential use. Home occupations are small home businesses that are operated inside the primary residence, administrative offices. You may also be aware, like doctors and dentist offices would be another use. So I'm just adding that is exempted from site plan control just for clarity's sake. And then I'm also adding agricultural related commercial industrial uses are being added as uses requiring site plan control. This is to be consistent with our official plan, which requires this under official plan direction under the county OP. It wasn't, that particular requirement was not in our old official plan, so it wasn't consistent. And the Planning Act requires that all our bylaws are consistent with our official plan. And that is the extent of the changes. You can see in the draft bylaw that those additions that I'm suggesting have been highlighted in yellow. And the rest of the bylaw is as per it was. The section numbering has changed, like the formatting of the section numbering has changed, but all the other sections in the bylaw are the same as in the old bylaw.
So quite a few housekeeping changes.
Yeah, a few housekeeping changes just for clarity's sake.
Yep. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I need someone to move the recommendation that's before us. Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Boyko. All in favor? That is carried. We move on to Carla Hope for the stop and close inland road allowance for Terror Road. And
I'll speak on behalf of Carla.
Thank you.
Who prepared the report. So yes, we've had a request from the Peacocks, who I believe are here. They want to stop up and close a section of unopened road allowance. It's near a property that's landlocked adjacent to 528 Terra Road. We do have a road closure policy that was adopted by council. So we would follow that process. So essentially what they're hoping to do is it is landlocked. The property adjacent to it, they've applied for a severance in order to gain some access to the landlocked parcel and provide them with the required road frontage to develop the landlocked parcel. The problem is a 66-foot unopened road allowance that's in the middle of it is in the way. So they would stop up and close that little portion of road allowance. The one thing that we would add, and I have spoken to Mr. Peacock about this, is we would, as part of the transaction, ask for an easement over that 66 feet. It is in our trails master plan. There's a couple of unopened road allowances. Well, there's several, and not just in Ennismore, but in other locations where we wouldn't want to take away that opportunity for a trail development. So 66 feet, there's lots of room there if we wanted to put in a recreational trail at some point in the future. And they were fine with that easement being added to that portion of the lands. So essentially, we would follow the road closure process, and then that would allow them to move through the severance process as well. So the recommendation is that we would stop up and close that section of road allowance, follow the process. They would be responsible for all the costs, so they would have to have a reference plan prepared. There is costs for the land that are established in our policy. So depending on the length of roadway that was stopped up and closed, the value of the lands would be based on that length. And then we would bring forward any bylaw in the future to execute any of the required documents to facilitate the transaction.
Right, thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions? Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Sennis. Thanks for the report. It's a good report. It's easy to understand. The only question is around the providing us with access, continued access over that unopened road allowance. Does that include on the severed portion too, so we can transition from the road to the unopened road allowance?
It would just be on the stopped up and closed piece.
Okay.
The remainder of the road allowance south of that would still be retained by the township.
Yeah, I just wondered if across the severance piece where their driveway is going to be, whether that would be part of that agreement. So
Yes, we would have easement over the entire 66 feet and the length of it. So we could basically have access in any area over that piece of unopened road allowance. Sorry, maybe
Yeah, I was
I'm not.
talking more regarding the red severed area that they're purchasing to get access to.
Oh, no, we weren't proposing that. No.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I would like someone to move the recommendation, please. Deputy Mayor Black, Councillor Boyko, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to consent items. Is there anything on the agenda that my colleagues would like pulled? Seeing none, I do actually have one item 5D. Adam, you've got a report on the Smith landfill. And my question is, in the report, you mentioned there's 13 years left of life for the landfill. When do we commence looking for a new one or doing the report? At what point in the life of the landfill does that happen?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's an ongoing process, the closing process. So we're stockpiling cover material, clean fill, and covering up and closing sections as we go. It's kind of a moving target that as we divert materials, that life of the landfill, that timeline keeps extending. We're substantially less than our average volume. So to be honest, I don't have a definitive date when we'd actually start planning a report to close the landfill, because that target keeps moving forward, right? So it's kind of that's a hard one.
Yeah, I understand. Janice?
Sure, and I think Adam's absolutely right. It is kind of a rolling target because we've increased the life of the landfill substantially over the last few years with some of the diversion programs we've put into place. I think, eventually when you get to that, you're looking at about 10 years life. I think you'd want to start looking at what your options are. It could be a very long process if we thought we wanted to try and expand at this site. I think if you were going to expand, you'd probably have to go up. But the other option would be turning it into a transfer station. So I think there's options we'd have to look at, and you'd want to get on it early. I'd say eventually when we get to that around the 10-year time frame, we probably really want to start looking at that.
Okay, so the idea is to divert as much as we can. Yeah. Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Sennis. Yeah, just again, supporting your last comment on diversion. The food cycler program has had a significant impact in our household. We were putting a bag out about every 2 weeks, and it's now every 3 weeks. We're putting a bag out. There's only 2 of us, mind you. But I was surprised how much of our waste was organic that could go through the cycler program. So hopefully the county, who is looking at diversion of that in the county, will look at hopefully a hybrid program as well. That would be food cycler for the more rural residents, because the cost to pick up would be expensive and frankly contrary to environmental practices, good environmental practices. But I think that program alone, if we can move it forward, will extend the life of our landfill site even longer. Again, just shocking how much, didn't realize how much of our waste was actually organic still.
Yes, Janice.
In terms of that, so all of our curbside collected garbage goes to Bensford now. So that there will be some that does come to our landfill site, so it will have an impact, but it's maybe a little bit smaller impact than what we first think of. So we really have to be creative to try and find some other diversion opportunities as well to go along with that one.
Okay.
We do
Alright.
certainly through our through the county levy, the ratepayers definitely pay for the Bensford site. Yep.
For sure. Okay, thank you very much. So I need someone to move the consent items. A through 5A through 10. No, sorry, 9. Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor, or I need a seconder. Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Move on to other new and unfinished business. We have a committee appointment with a recommendation. I need someone to move that. Moved by Councillor Koulis, seconded by Councillor Henry, all in favor. That's carried. Is there any other new or unfinished business my colleagues want to bring forward? Seeing none, we're going to move into closed. So can I have a motion to do that? Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Koulis, all in favor. That's carried. We'll meet in the other room. Thank you. All right, colleagues, I need a motion to move the recommendation that we discussed in closed. Moved by Deputy Mayor Black, seconded by Councillor Henry, all in favor. It's carried, thank you. And we are dealing with bylaws 2023-024 to establish the rates of taxation for the year 2023. 2023-025 site plan control bylaw, 2023-026 zoning bylaw, remove of holding for 45 Rabbit, 2023-027 appointment of committee members, David Lavalley, with the fence viewers, property standards, animal control. Can I have a mover for those? Moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Koulis, all in favor. It's carried. Thank you. And a moving the confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Boyko, seconded by Deputy Mayor Black. All in favor. It's carried. Move to adjourn. Councillor Henry moves that, seconded by Councillor Koulis. All in favor. That's carried. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.